So taking the sprints, but doing a separate sprint championship. So points from the sprint don't count towards the F1 World Championship.
I like the premise of that, but I hate it because no one will care.
This is what Hannah does this all the time. My wife Hannah, she's like, she always does it. It was like, it feels like ages ago, but actually no, it feels like yesterday. I'm like, what do you mean? So it just did they not catch each other out?
It's hard to sound smart when you're not actually being smart at all. Like it's like, yeah, it feels like it's somewhat, smooth, but it's also rugged at the same time. It's like that sort of like contrast thing, like what reviewers do.
So explain to me.
So basically, the idea of that, like, I can understand why that makes sense because like sprints are totally different to Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. They're just not as long, they're not the same. The same strategy doesn't go into a sprint, whatever. But at the same time, you would get to the end of a season and absolutely no one would care about the sprint championship.
Yes, this is my issue.
Yeah.
Why would anyone give a fuck?
No one would care. The drivers would not give a shit. And then that would translate into the races as well. Like when a sprint race is, when we're towards the end of a season and we've got a sprint weekend and it's getting to like do or die business end of the season. I mean, it's not going to be the case this season because Verstappen's slapping everyone. Even for a different position in the championship, a sprint weekend means a lot because there's more points on offer.
Yeah.
If you have a separate sprint championship and it's like with 3 races to the end of the season and you're in a title battle, you're not risking anything for a sprint for 10 points in a sprint championship. Who cares?
Is there a way of making this kind of like a Carabao Cup?
But no one cares about the Carabao Cup either.
This is my point.
This is the issue. So I think genuinely, you just
chuck the reserves in. I think Crofty did say that. It was like, this is like, maybe you use the reserve drivers for...
Now that would be cold. I like that.
But
that's the only positive of that, I think.
But then you're having to use the F1 cars. This is the difference, right? Because in football, you can have a big squad and you can rotate the squad and you can have other players play in these cup competitions where you don't want to risk them too much of injury. You prioritize different competitions. But I think in F1, like I don't think that really works when you've got you're putting your car in the hands of, say, a reserve pushing. In this cup competition, the sprints could become, and then bins it, and then you don't have a car for the race, or your team's got to work overnight. Like, it is more complicated.
Yeah, and also you don't. Obviously, there are personal accolades in football. If we're comparing, Golden Boot, for example, like imagine final day of the season, Mo Salah could win Golden Boot, and then Klopp drops him. He's gonna be fuming. But it's not quite as intrinsic as like Drivers' Championship points. Like if I'm in the fourth best car on the grid and I'm sitting out a race weekend, I'm sitting out a sprint, or because the reserve driver's going to get in, I'm like, what do you mean? I'm in a battle in the championship right now. Why are you depriving points from me?
Yeah,
because ultimately, the Drivers' Championship and Constructors' Championship are both extremely important in their own right to different people. Whereas like a Golden Boot or like Golden Glove, like, it's kind of important, but at the end of the day, you'd rather win the league than have your striker win Golden Boot.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's... you look at the sprints now, and part of the reason they brought the sprints in is because you want there to be competitive running on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, over the weekend, we actually do have competitive running on every day because we have F3 and F2. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like... Do you think that people would care more about, say, F2 if all of the F1 teams had a team in F2? So say there was a Mercedes F2 team, a Red Bull F2 team. I know they're like, you see the liveries, but like an actual where it felt like the F2 teams were closer to the F1 teams. Do you think that would make a difference? Do you think that would fulfill because we do have competitive running on every day if you care about the F2 and F3, but ultimately, like, I watch a lot of the F2. I don't really watch the F3. And like, if I don't watch the F3 and like I immerse myself in this sport, then it's a select few who will be invested enough to watch the F3, for example, and the F2.
That's actually I'm not 1,000% sure. Just because you have so many, like we've had Red Bull Juniors in F2 for for ages, since like time began. And even though they're not like, it's not a Red Bull team that they're racing for, half of them are. Like, I think High Tech, both the drivers are Red Bull juniors. Whatever team Maloney's in, I'm pretty sure they're both Red Bull juniors. There's him and Fittipaldi.
Yeah.
Hauger's team last year was both Red Bull junior. So you kind of have
there's a lot of
Red Bull teams there, and there probably are some Red Bull fans who are like, oh fucking hell, there's loads of Red Bull liveries in F2. I might give this a watch or like see who the next possible Red Bull driver is. So I think that if you had a few more teams that were a little bit more invested in getting their juniors in and putting a livery on, like maybe because Vesti's a Mercedes junior driver, isn't he? So maybe if like you slapped a little Mercedes livery on that, I think there would be a little bit more interest. But I don't think it needs to be like the full-fledged teams.
Yeah, and I guess
think that'll make a difference.
Yeah,
really.
I guess so many of these young drivers are affiliated with programs, you're right. And it's weird that, Vesti doesn't have like a Mercedes livery. Behrman's kind of not really either. He's not got a full Ferrari livery either. So, I don't think a cup competition within F1... I don't know. Is there legs to that?
The only way that it would work in terms of like if you've got the reserve drivers in at any point, is if it was like a wild card where you actually had to, where there was a law like written in, like a rule written into sprints where, and I don't know how this would go, to be honest with you. I don't know how this would get taken, but where like every team one time during a sprint weekend has to use their junior driver of choice.
We have that FP1 rule, don't you?
Well, yeah, but I guess, just translate that into a sprint where at some point you can choose, it can be whatever sprint race you want, but whoever's second in the championship out of your two main drivers has to sit out for a sprint race and the reserve driver comes in. That's a good way of integrating young drivers in where there's not that many seats as well and giving them actual like seat time in a race format where they wouldn't get that experience usually. But again, it's just kind of like the benefits of it. Like, would we get a lot of accidents? I don't know. Like if there's one Grand Prix where 6 teams decide, fuck it, we're using our wild card. You've got 6 rookies just randomly on the grid who've maybe never driven a Formula One car before.
And then cost cap as well. Like if drivers are shunting, obviously the
Haas don't even have a junior program. I don't even know if they have a reserve driver.
They'd have to take one of Ferrari's.
Yeah. Like the admin just gets in for a race or something. I don't know. Like
the TikToks would be fire.
Yeah, facts.
In the car.
Yeah.
Stick the fire on. There's still there's definitely more to be done with the sprint. I still feel like they could make it work as it is. Fundamentally, where it's on a Saturday and the points go towards the championship and it is one championship.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I feel like I'd love there to be like an equivalence, like a cup competition. That could be really cool. But I just, with all of the complexity around the sport, and it's not just human beings with football boots.
Fuck it. One weekend a year where everyone, it's just a totally separate championship. It's not to do with the main championship whatsoever. But every team slaps 2 reserves in. They can be loaned if they want. If it's a Ferrari junior and Haas want to use them, fine, whatever. Put them in the car for the weekend and divvy out a bit of prize money based on where those juniors end up finishing in like a qualifying and race format. At a race weekend where there's no F2 or anything.
And if there's only like 6 sprints a year, and it's not every single race, then maybe
because if there's prize money on the line, that maybe encourages
method to the madness.
Then maybe there is. It's there somewhere. Get me? But that could be a little cup competition.
It could be.
That's like a Papa John's trophy, though, isn't it? That's not. I wouldn't say it's Carabao Cup because it's not going on for a while.